Good morning. We look today at the remainder of Acts 23, verses 16 through 35. And as we concluded yesterday, we found a plot against Paul. 40 men had pledged themselves to make sure that they would do away with Paul. What a wonderful way to say, kill him, huh? But we find out today, it says that Paul's sister's son found out, his nephew. I mean, maybe they didn't have a word for a nephew, I don't know, but Paul's sister's son found out about the ambush, or it says the son of Paul's sister, anyway, and he gained entrance to the barracks. He went to visit Paul, his uncle, and told his uncle about this plot against his life. And then Paul said, you need to go tell the tribune. And, you know, we haven't heard this tribune's name, the captain of the guard. I mean, he's just referred to as the tribune, and there are centurions and soldiers and stuff. We don't know names and stuff, but so anyway, Paul's nephew went, and Paul called for one of the centurions, the guards, and said, "My nephew has something to say to the tribune, to the chief of police." So the centurion, the guard, took Paul's nephew and told the tribune what was going on, the captain of the guard. He says, "What have you to report?" "Well, the Jews have plotted against Paul, and there are 40 of them that have pledged themselves to make sure that they do away with him before he gets to trial, before anything more can happen." And this captain of the guard, the police chief, remembering that Paul is a Roman citizen, doesn't want to have a riot, doesn't want to have a lynching. He doesn't want to have this happening in his neck of the woods and a potential uproar, because he knew that there were a lot of people that admired Paul, looked up to Paul, were following and listening to Paul, becoming Christians because of Paul. And he knew that, according to Roman law, Paul he had every right to a fair trial. So this captain of the guard, or the police chief, tribune, he calls for two of the centurions of the guards, and he says, "Get ready to leave by 9 o'clock tonight for Caesarea. And I'm going to take, and listen to this, he's taking 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen." That's a lot of men, a lot of people to protect Paul from these 40 conspirators that are going to, determined to do away with him. But this is the importance that this captain of the guard, the tribune, puts on making sure that Paul gets a fair trial, making sure that the tribune, isn't guilty of, not doing his duties to the proper extent. And then it says, also provide mounts with an S, a plural, for Paul to ride. So they're going to make haste. They aren't just going to, walk along slowly. They're going to get there. Because, if you're going to, I remember reading about the Pony Express, they had stables every so often, and this person riding, young boy, young girl, whichever was riding, would ride like the wind and just about wear the horse out, get to the next spot, hop off of one horse and hop onto the next, so they could make speed. So this is what they were doing with Paul. They were ready and prepared to make speed with Paul to get him to Caesarea, and it says, take him safely to Felix, the governor. So Felix is, the position of higher power. And as I said, we haven't heard the name of this tribune yet, but he writes a letter to send along to Felix. He says, Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency the Governor. So this tribune's name, the chief of the police, I've referred to him, is Claudius Lysias. So, and Felix, those names are in the history, so we can find those names. And so there are a lot of instances that have other proof to the Bible than just what we have written in the Bible. But he sends his greetings, and he talks about Paul. He says, this man was seized by the Jews. And he goes on to explain about Paul and about, that he's a Roman citizen. I came with a guard and rescued him, and he deserves a fair trial, and I'm sending him to you so that you can make sure he gets a safe trial, a fair trial. And I will send his accusers to you so that you can hear in a court of law that you are having jurisdiction over, that you are presiding over, and you can make a determination for this man. Basically, so, the Claudius Lysias says, when I was informed that there was a plot against this man, a death threat, not just a death threat, a death promise by some of the Jews, he said, I'm doing everything I can to protect this man. I was just thinking about what would have happened if Jesus had had that protection. Jesus died on the cross for you and for me. It was, there was prophecy about it. Jesus knew what was going to happen. If the Roman government, if Pilate and Herod had gone out of their way, they said, I find no guilt in this man. I wash my hands of this man's blood. Take him and deal with him yourself. They didn't want to pass judgment on Jesus, but yet they didn't offer the protection to Jesus that Paul had. Jesus wasn't a Roman citizen, for one, evidently. He was a Jew born in Bethlehem, raised in Nazareth. He was, a nobody. Paul had some credentials. Anyway, Paul was under the protection of Felix the governor. And, so Felix the governor says, after he reads the letter, he asked what province he belongs to, and they found out it was Cilicia. And he said, I will give you he's telling Paul, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive. And then Felix ordered that Paul would be kept under guard in Herod's headquarters. So we have Felix as the governor. Herod is still, the big kahuna. Herod is the one I just referred to. Herod, and Pilate, they were the two that were Jesus was. So this, and I guess there were several Herods, but this isn't so awful many years after Jesus' resurrection. So it's the same Herod that is still in control, and Paul is being held safely in Herod's headquarters. It doesn't say in the barracks, it doesn't say in the jail, but in his headquarters. And that's when, when Herod and Pilate examined Jesus as well, it was in their quarters. It wasn't, they didn't go down to the dungeon and inquire. They had him in their quarters. And so Paul is under house arrest, so to speak, for his own safety and his own protection as a Roman citizen, as a person who is not speaking of insurrection against the Roman government. He isn't stirring up trouble that way for the Roman government. He's causing confusion, causing misunderstanding, causing concern among the Jewish leaders, among the church leaders. And, I don't know, it's so sad in so many ways that we as church, we as people can't find a better way to get along all the time. It's just, it's so disheartening when we end up on different sides of the same situation, where often with a little bit of common sense, a little bit of common courtesy, we could come to a much better solution than what we have. We could come up with much better ways of working together and dealing together. And I haven't really been involved in a lot of major church bodies coming together with a common agreements, but I remember that, when in the early 2000s, back in the 1990s as well, when some major church bodies were working together to have what we would refer to as common communion, a common grounds where we would be able to share pastors and share theology and agree on more points than we disagree on, but we'd get hung up on something. And it's still the same today. We get hung up on these little things, and I've commented about Holy Communion before, but I had a person one time that, as I was visiting his mother-in-law, and he was of a different religion, different Protestant religion than I am, I asked him if he would want to join us for communion. His mother-in-law had invited him to join us for communion, and it was, well, you know, my church teaches if it's properly administrated, I could, but I'll pass. And you know, it's kind of one of those. Holy Communion is a gift from Jesus Christ. And he says, as often as you eat and drink it, do this in remembrance of me. He doesn't say, you know, make sure that you're this denomination or that denomination or whatever it is. He says, this is my body. You are my people. You are my sisters and brothers. I mean, we are all sisters and brothers in Christ. And it's so disheartening so often to find, you know, an example like this in the Bible, in Acts of the Jews. I mean, we had the Jews against Jesus. We got the Jews against Paul. We got the Jews against Peter. We got the leadership of the major religious organization of the time, you know, basically one of them anyway, in the Jewish faith, at odds with each other, rather than working together for the good and the glory of God. And I find that just so sad, because God blesses us all, and it. You know, God is faithful even when we're not. I mean, that's in the Bible. I can't tell you exactly where it is, but you know, even when we're not faithful, and we sin every day. I mean, we do. I know I do. I can't speak for you, I guess, but we fall away from God. But yet God is always faithful to His promises, and it doesn't matter if I'm LCMC Lutheran, if I'm Missouri Synod Lutheran, if I'm ELCA Lutheran, if I'm Free Lutheran, if I'm Presbyterian or Methodist or any one of, you know, hundreds of religions. You know, there are hundreds of Christian religions. You know, there's only one Christ. There's only one Christ. There's only one God. But yet we find division. And you know, God would have us work together. God would have us protect each other, look out for each other, as Felix is doing for Paul, looking out for Paul, looking out for his best interests. So, as we live our daily lives, and I wrote a review last night of something, and I was disappointed yesterday. I was frustrated yesterday a little bit with that, but yet I understand the dilemma of so much of what goes on in the world. And I guess I need to try to be a little bit more gracious. I hope we all can. God blesses us richly and is always gracious and patient with us. So may you live in that trust and love of God's grace.